I'm going to shake the table a little bit now.
Shake it, break it. I hope it doesn't break mine though.
Or mine. So I'll say curiosity opened me up to the world of investment banking. I was very curious. I wanted to know more, very hungry to know more. When you understand what your investors want, then you can easily answer the question if it's easy or difficult. An investor looks at your industry and they don't think that your industry there's no real demand for what you're offering. The demand is what ties to the customer universe. So maybe by the time they assess it, they see that only 20,000 people in the world have demand for your product or service. It's not as attractive. If you cannot successfully generate internal funding, even if you get all the external funding in the world, it's going to be difficult.
My name is Mo, and this is the Hungry Creative Podcast. Today, we have an amazing guest who has done a lot of work in the finance sector, and she's a founder, she's a business leader, she's a strategic finance expert. I just can't wait for so many gems that she's about to share with us today regarding finance and everything money related from a business standpoint and also like from an entrepreneurial standpoint. I would like you to introduce yourself, tell our audience who you are and what you do.
I am Ejemen Roluga, very happy to go by EJ, and I am currently managing partner at Grovane. Grovane is basically a company that supports the funding journey of businesses. So whether you are an early stage company, a scrappy founder looking to transition, a mid-sized company or a large organization operating for either profit or non-profit, we have built a lot of capacity in the last few years around truly helping you access capital, whether internal or external, to either launch, grow, or scale. Today, we operate legally out of 2 countries, Canada and Nigeria, and we also have rep offices in a few markets, the United States, Zambia, etc.
How did you first come across finance? What was that very first point when you realized that, this is like the space for you?
So, I have a cousin who was in investment banking, and my cousin is pretty impressive. Then I knew nothing about, corporate finance, so specifically corporate finance or investment banking. I just knew that, I was studying in the university, I was studying accounting, and so I was already introduced to finance and accounting. And then speaking to my cousin, I think he used to work in investment banking in the UK. And that introduced me to the world of investment banking specifically. So that interest and curiosity, I remember Goldman Sachs, they were coming into Nigeria at the time. I was in 300 level. And, the curiosity, there was also a classmate of mine, Afolabi, who was interested, as finance people or accountants, you are interested in anything. At that point in uni, you don't really know the difference between accounting and finance, but you are curious. So anything that looks like you deal with numbers, whether it's from an individual, a corporate perspective, you want to know more. So he told me about the Goldman Sachs event happening in Lagos, Nigeria, and I went. And when I went there, I think that further fueled my curiosity. What do these people do? They look like they have an air around them. They look like they know what they're doing, right? Okay. It just seemed interesting and impressive to me. And that really was. So I would say curiosity opened me up to the world of investment banking. So after schooling, interestingly, I landed in a mortgage bank. Nothing much happened there. But after work, a colleague of mine was working in investment banking, and I had done my service and was looking to, work full-time in a company. And I sent my CV to him because they were currently recruiting at the time. I went for the interviews, and that's what basically brought me into the investment banking space.
That's an interesting journey. So it was like you came across it like coincidentally, or
maybe first inspired by my cousin, and then became curious, and then coincidentally I heard about the event, went there, was even more inspired and curious, and then accidentally that became the first place I worked officially post-service year.
Interesting. Having worked in this industry for the past 15 years, as you said, What are some of the initial challenges that you faced when coming in from being a student to now becoming someone who is now working actively in that space? What are some of the challenges that you faced?
The first was being very introverted. I used to be
Mm.
very introverted,
Wow.
right? Yes. You see, you can't even relate. I used to be very introverted. So, coming into investment banking, whether we like it or not, investment banking is a male dominated space, is one of
Mm.
those sectors where
Yeah.
you typically have men ruling the affairs of the activities in that industry or sector. So, the
Yeah.
first thing was having to truly ease in as a
Mm.
woman. A very simple example, in the first investment bank I worked with, I was the queen of IBD for a while because I was the only woman for a few years. So
What's
having
IBD?
to investment banking, IBD,
Okay.
investment banking division. Yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I would say the first thing was having to come out of my shell,
Mm.
right? And you don't come out of your shell overnight. So I used to say that, for a very long time, I used to have a lot of things on my mind,
Mm.
but just being able to express it very easily was a
Mm.
challenge in an industry that requires you to be vocal. Remember, I mentioned something. Investment bankers have an air around them,
Yeah.
requires you to have a persona, a strong personality that
Mm.
is noticeable when you walk into the room and when you speak.
Gotcha.
So almost transitioning into this new world I had found myself, that was the
Mm.
first challenge for me. But again, remember, curiosity brought me in, and
Yeah.
curiosity retained me. I
True.
was very curious,
Mm.
always wanting to learn. So that was the first thing. I was very curious. I wanted to know more, very hungry to know more.
Mm.
And I would say that is what truly changed the game for me.
That's an interesting and common trend I've seen. I mean, I can even attest to that personally, that curiosity does play a huge role in like being able to adapt to an environment or to anything that is like something that you walk into with a different expectation, and then you realize it requires some kind of skills or
Exactly.
additional skills that you didn't even prepare for, but that curiosity takes you through. So can you simplify what you really do to an 8-year-old? Imagine that you're speaking to an 8-year-old. What do you do for businesses, or what do you do what's your practice?
In simple terms, we help you
Yeah.
access funding. Funding can be equity, funding can be debt. Equity is basically where you give a third party ownership in your business. Well, not necessarily money, financial and non financial commitment, depending on the terms of the deal. Or
Hmm.
debt. Debt is an obligation that you owe. You take money and you pay back over time. It's a commitment you have to meet. So that is the second type of funding. And the third is grants. Grants can be, people refer to it as free money, but I cringe at that word because it's never really free. Grant is basically money that has been awarded to you to solve grand challenges in your market.
Hmm.
Challenges can be as simple as driving financial inclusion, creating access to healthcare, creating access to basic education, creating
Hmm.
access to serving an underserved or an ignored market or a minority group. Whatever that impact is, depending on the interest of the funder, you would always have money chasing you with no strings attached. That's as simple as I can. I hope I was able to explain that.
That makes
So
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
That
so
makes a lot
what
of
we
sense.
do
Yeah.
is really supporting that funding journey, literally navigating growth together with you, and holding you to ensure you access money. But I would like to mention that funding is the end goal. Before you get to funding, there are so many means to that end goal. So when we say that we help you, we support your funding journey, it means that we basically handhold you to access capital, internal or external, to either drive your growth, scale your business, or even launch a product or a business.
How easy or how difficult is it to get funding as a business?
It's almost like you're saying, how easy or difficult is it to go to the market to buy something without having money with you?
Hmm.
And I say
That's an
that because,
interesting analogy.
yes, and I say
It
that
involves a lot
because
of begging though. I
the reason
mean, going by
I
that
always,
analogy.
yeah, I always equate funding to what a willing buyer is happy to give a willing seller. So
Mm.
when you are trying to raise money, whether it is
Yeah.
equity, whether it is debt or grants,
Yeah.
you are exchanging. In the case of grants, you are exchanging impact for that money. You are promising impact for that money. In the case of equity, you are exchanging, a promise of return on their
Yeah.
investment for that money,
Yeah.
right? So it's always, I look at it as simple as trade, right? Because I always say that I like to think like the very simple trader who is, buying and, buying and selling, or involved in the buying and selling or trade in the market. Everything around life to me is viewed from that lens or perspective.
Mm.
So, how easy is it to raise money?
Yeah.
There's something we used to say in investment banking. If you are a beautiful bride, when I say beautiful bride, I'm referring now to a business. A beautiful
Yeah.
bride is a business that can truly promise, can truly deliver on what it promises. So let me backtrack a bit. Remember, I talked about there are other classes under equity, debt, and grant, but let's even simplify it and assume there are just three: equity, debt,
Yeah.
and grant. When an equity investor wants to invest money in you, everything else you're saying is good, but it's really about the return on their investment.
Mm.
Does your business model, or can your business model deliver that? Does your industry have enough customers to guarantee the return on? You remember, return on investment trickles down from growing your top line, doing a
Yeah.
lot of transactions that trickles down to revenue, optimizing your costs that trickles down to net income. Your net income is your revenue less cost is your net income, which is what flows back to returns at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
can you truly, that's one return option. The second
Yeah.
is, if you are a valuable business, then there's capital appreciation on their initial investment. So the simple question, every analysis they're going to do with you is targeting one simple question: can you deliver the return on investment to them?
Mm.
And it's not emotional. It's as
Yeah.
simple as that. For debt investors, it's a simple question: do you have the ability to pay back? Right? So not necessarily about your returns. So with debt investors, I will equate it to cash flows. Are you generating enough cash flows to pay them back their money? Remember, it is an obligation. Give me
Yeah.
money over a time you pay back. With grant investors or grant funders, it's really about impact. When you understand what your investors want, then you can easily answer the question if it's easy or difficult. So if you are promising return on investment, if an investor looks at your industry and they don't think that your industry there's no real demand for what you're offering. The demand is what ties to the customer universe. So maybe by the time they assess it, they see that only 20,000 people in the world have demand for your product or service. It's not as attractive, right? Because remember, they're in it for returns.
True.
Without emotions. So, and that's why I sighed, because that question is hydra-headed. How easy? You need to know what you're promising first, and then you will now be able to determine if you can truly attract investors by clearly articulating how you can achieve their promise or your promise to them.
Wow. I've learned something just by this little one that you just mentioned now. I've learned something. I've taken something out. I won't tell you what I've learned, but I've learned something. And and I'm going to use it. I have some questions that I've lined up for you just from this last one. And it's interesting. It's a world on its own. And I feel like there's a demystification that needs to be done on this topic. I think it's a foreign subject to a lot of people. I speak from personal experience. There isn't so much financial literacy education in school. We didn't really get much of that. I know this is more focused towards businesses, but it's human beings that run businesses, right? And human beings come from families and schools, and they take some of those behaviors to businesses as well. So I want to speak as a startup now, as an entrepreneur, an SME. For an SME, how crucial is getting funding, in scaling business? So, for example, I give a case study of a simple business. I'm an entrepreneur. I started making clothes. I have a fashion line. I might not even be a tailor. I might just have a fashion line. And I have operations. I have a retail store, maybe personally funded most times. The usual trend is that this person starts that business, then challenges here and there. It could be like, okay, sales not consistent, operations not stable, then demand. People are not really buying as much as the person expected. What can funding do for that kind of business? For that entrepreneur that is sitting in that space thinking about, how can I really change things around? I know my product is good, or my product has potential to have more impact. What can I do or how can I even go about it?
I'm going to shake a bit of it. I'm going to shake the table a little bit
Shake
now.
it, break it. I hope it doesn't break mine though.
Or mine.
Okay.
I'll say it anyways. There is this myth that when you get funding, automatically all your business woes disappear. That's not real. If you cannot successfully generate internal funding, even if you get all the external funding in the world, it's going to be difficult. I will use an example.
Yeah.
We launched a service. I'm in a space where you have a number of players offering advisory services to businesses. We launched our grants program well over a year ago. And from day one, when we put that service in the market, the demand was obvious to me. So the demand is not when you get 10,000 people. If you launch, and it's the hard truth, if you launch a business and month one, not one person is, my approach to driving a business is pretty interesting.
Okay.
I let the market drive me. So if you put out a service, and without emotions, it has happened to me before, so I know. You put out a service or a product, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, nobody. I mean, the truth is, if you get $1 million that day, there's no magic that is going to happen. Yeah. So you need to ensure that you are, first of all, selling a product or a service that customers want. As simple as that. If you cannot generate internal funding, because if you ask me, if I'm an investor today investing externally in businesses, it's not really about your, how many people have truly given you $1 for what you're offering. You can have your strategies, right? But is there one customer who has genuinely, paid you because they need that service? That is the simple litmus test.
Yeah.
And it's important to be honest with yourself. As business owners, we are emotional. You've put in time, energy, effort into that product or service. So there's, it's like your baby.
Yeah.
But you want to tell yourself the truth. If you are pushing 6 months, you've not had one customer pay for your service, I'm not even saying shut it down. You need to tweak your business model. It's either what you're offering is not resonating with your customers, or you need to pivot, or worst case, shut it down. So external capital is not the only solution. If you have not successfully generated, there's a difference between, we are seeing demand for our service, true demand, and then you need funding to scale it.
Okay.
Right. I know scale is relative. Yeah. You need money to scale it from where you are to where maybe over the next 12 months. Scale today is different from what scale might mean to you as a business owner in 4 years down the road. So if you are still struggling with teething issues, so let's separate revenue from cost or operational issues. Are you generating revenue? That is the first simple question. Is a willing buyer happy and willing to pay you $1 or $1 for your service?
Yeah.
If yes, then you are onto something. Then maybe you need capital to either optimize your operations, right, or put in structures. But the first question is revenue. Is anyone truly willing to pay you for what you're offering? If the answer is, I'm not sure, they don't know me yet. They know you, but they know you within the context of where you have sold it to.
Yeah.
But because I don't imagine you launching something and not even speaking to like the people who need the service are the guys you should be talking to first. Even if it's 10 of them, 10 of them, 15 of them. If not one person thinks that your service or your product is what they need, you need to take a look. You need to introspect and review your business model again. You need to, to make tweaks, pivots. You need to make those hard decisions. And you will see that it's easier to know. It's easier when revenue is never the issue, right? Now scaling that revenue is a different conversation. Looking at your cost structure or optimizing your operation, that's a separate conversation. But at the very least, the litmus test is there a customer? For every 10 customers or potential customers you speak to, if 0 is interested in your product, you need to take a look again.
Wow, you did shake that table. Yeah. You did. Okay, we hear stories about some very interesting cases and stories. For example, businesses getting funding and then the CEO ghosting and So what tell us, can you share what's going on in that space? What's going on? Because it's becoming like a trend. Anytime I check Tech About, I see something. There's always something.
I always say that I try not to speak about those situations because I am not in there. However, I think it still goes back to what I just said, which is before you raising external capital wouldn't automatically erase your issues as a business.
Yeah.
You can be very great at talking to investors. There are people who are great at communicating the value of the idea or even their business.
Salesman.
Fantastic salesmen. They are excellent at just selling.
Sweet
right?
mouth.
Sweet mouth. So you can talk your way to an investor and get the investment. However, you cannot really talk your way to a customer. You can do that to 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
But it's a ceiling.
Yeah.
A customer would really part with their money if they see value. If what you are selling to them is what they need. And as simple as that. So it's just, the only thing I would say about, the news of, especially in the startup ecosystem of businesses that have raised money and all of a sudden disappear, or you hear all sorts of very horrid tales.
Very crazy stories.
I will always say that if you trace it back, there was never a real demand. I've heard of companies creating artificial demand, right? Yeah, it's simple. Let me give you an example. Let's say you run give me an example. Let's say you run a fish farm, right? And I hope I don't get into trouble for this, but I'll say it anyway. Because there's a world where you can create artificial demand for something. Finn runs a fish farm, and then and you have 20,000 customers, right? I reach out to Finn and I say, oh, Finn, I can see that you're running a fish farm. What's a complimentary service? Or maybe not very complimentary.
Packaging?
Packaging for what now?
Or feed or farm food, like fish food.
Fish food, exactly. Yeah. Good. I can reach out to Finn and say, Finn, let's work together. You have 20,000 customers. For every fish, every 10 bundles of fish that you sell, we'll give them our food packaging. Guess what? And you don't have to pay, right? You don't have to pay me because I'm trying to get the word out there for my product. I can give that to you, and Finn doesn't have to do anything. Just that when Finn is packaging the fish, he puts the farm food included.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I still have sold 20,000. There was no real demand. Yeah, there was no real demand for it. Was artificial. You created it artificially. And I've seen, there's also a difference between what I just said and partnerships. Building partnerships that work, right?
True.
But I've seen people throw out, we call it all sorts of names, BD, right? You align with collaboration is fantastic. So you align with another party, but automatically including my farm food to fish packaging doesn't
Yeah.
mean there's a demand for it. It's free anyway,
True.
so
True.
cost nobody anything.
Yeah.
So I can be bragging and saying I have sold 20,000 farm foods, but in reality, there was no demand for it.
Hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? So
I see what you're
you,
saying.
you see people use some of these things to raise money.
Hmm.
People use some of these things to create an artificial demand for their service or product.
I see.
So it goes back to what I said. If whenever you hear a tale, and I'm sure the startup world is pretty tough, right?
Yeah.
Building a business, trying to find product market fit is difficult. Sometimes you can go 2 years in, 2.5, 3 years. But what I would say, even if you are going 2 years, 3 years in, what you should not do is stick to what you started 2 or 3 years before. If what you're doing is R&D, pivoting or tweaking, making tweaks for 2 years, I feel like that works. I've seen companies who found product market fit after 2 years and they have 2, 3 customers paying them an average of $300,000 per year. That is good. You know that you found your break and it just grows from there, right? But what you should not do is saying, "Oh, you are doing nothing about tweaking your business model and staying where it is." And that's why I always say that getting money will just mean that's where you find some of what I just talked about. People creating further artificial demand for their services and not taking the time to truly look for the customers who need what they are selling or tweak their product or service to fit what the customers need and are willing to pay for. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely shedding more light on that
Yeah.
space. So, still speaking on the challenges and some of the recent trends, I think there's something happening in the African space now. Some people have been speaking about. I've been reading some articles about these things that happen. Still writing on this same thing about funding people, CEOs. So I think I read one particular article they were speaking about like the ripple effects of some of these trends, right? Because it seems like there's now the information is at disposal of everyone. Like the way it's now more accessible, right? The investment, getting funding, it wasn't as accessible as it is now, right? Any startup, overnight, pam, before you know it, they get whatever, get funding, and 2 years, 1 year down the line, some don't even last 1 year, and something happens. So, but now there's like a shift, or there's like some kind of trend, which is not necessarily like a good one, just not giving like a good impression of businesses in Africa to investors. Through
More like it has created a trust deficit in the
basically,
startup
basically,
ecosystem. Yeah.
basically, basically. So, as a founder, how can someone navigate these challenges? How can you reinforce trust in your investors at this point where we are right now with the whole doubts and the whole uncertainties around this thing? So if I were an investor, how would a founder really convince me to put their money up in their business, basically?
Okay, fantastic question. Again, it feels like I will destroy all the tables before this session is over.
Please, by all means, go ahead.
The way the ecosystem is set up, and you're spot on. I try not to talk about businesses because until I've walked in the shoes of the founder, I have no right. In hindsight, everybody is a fantastic advisor, right? But if I've
True
not
that.
walked in your shoes, I really have not earned the right to tell you how you should have done it better. I can only speak from my lens, but let me even talk about the ecosystem generally. It's a painful one because what has happened today is investors are 1,000 times more cautious. So unfortunately, there is that the season of salesmen, selling a good game and getting money for it is gone. And I would not even say it was the investor's fault, right? When there's a buzz about a specific region, right? Like we had a few years back, specifically around Africa, there are always, providers of capital chasing opportunities to max out their return on investment, right? Like I said, So we saw capital chasing startups in Africa. Unfortunately, with the news here and there, and just even taking a few examples, just the you know post post bankruptcy Didi, finding out that a ton a ton of the issues really was around mismanagement, etc. It further fuels the distrust in businesses. The first thing I would say is, interestingly, I've come across a lot more very, hardworking founders who truly are building something interesting. We've seen, the likes of Edukoya, that shut down and returned capital back to the founder. So you can tell that a founder like that, in my opinion, really was out to build something with the best of intentions. You return the money. It's honorable to do that. So if I were to talk to businesses looking, to answer your question, how should founders present themselves, right, to investors given the trust deficit in the market?
Yeah,
The only way
basically.
is to, talk to investors when you know that you can truly promise on what you can deliver and deliver on what you promise. The era of launching something and chasing money that is non-existent is gone. What you want to do is start from where you are. Join accelerator programs that offer funding that can give you some runway,
Yeah.
access grant funding. That's what you can do. Get money from family and friends. Because right now, investors are not smiling. It's really
It's true.
about, what is your what do you call it? They want to know your ARR, your monthly recurring revenue. They want to know your annual recurring revenue. They want to know if you are EBITDA positive, which is, a long stretch, but more PEs would ask you about your EBITDA, right? For smaller companies, have you found product market fit? Do you, particularly your MRR and ARR, they are now very important metrics that were not so much as, some of the biggest considerations a few years back. So there's no need wasting your time going to investors when you are still an idea. If you are still an idea, get money from family and friends, bootstrap, get into accelerators, reach out, seek grant funding, grants from accelerators, grant from investors to help you really just bootstrap and, refine your idea till you are onto something very important. That really should be the order. Yeah. And that's what I think we have come back to today.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I think that was the initial order of things before
Exactly.
there was now
Exactly.
that
The
whole
bubble.
surge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, thanks, EJ. Listening to you
Sure.
speak on these topics, very, very key things to note and very important things for founders and for businesses to know, and your advice on how founders can also position themselves and also
Yeah.
go in a more, should I say, organic way.
Yeah.
So just backtracking on like your like evolving and like how you kind of like came into this space, also like being a woman, being a mom, being a wife. How challenging has it been? What are some of the things that you faced as being able to navigate this career path that you've taken on?
That's an interesting and maybe a bit of an emotional question for me, because I try not to pause and think about it, because it's almost like you standing at the top of a mountain and looking downwards.
Mm.
You suddenly become afraid.
Mm.
So I don't do it. I don't look down, or I don't look back. Um, Being a mom in this fast-paced industry, or being a mom, being a wife, uh, it can be a lot. But I remember starting my journey in investment banking, fantastic, fantastic partners um, who almost made it possible for me not to look back. Because if I did, I'm not sure I would have lasted 6 years. I just kept going on and on. And I joined as a single woman, got married, started having children. It was a bit tough. Not the company, just the space generally. It's very fast paced, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of demand from clients, and you being readily available multiple times. There was a season where I had to take my, at the time I had just one child. I had to take my child every Saturday and sometimes Sunday to the office with my nanny
Oh my God.
for a season. And the season is not 1 month. I'm
Hmm.
talking several months.
Wow.
When I was still, growing through the ranks as a junior banker, I had to do it,
And you're
right?
going
Because
to work on Saturdays.
and Sundays, yeah,
Excuse
yeah.
me? What?
Yes. So this has,
Sundays?
yeah,
Okay. That's
yeah.
crazy.
Again, nothing to do with the company at the time. It's just the nature of the job. When you're in investment banking, it's very fast paced. Trust me, I'm putting it mildly. So no one will tell you to come to the office on Saturdays or Sundays. But if you have a deliverable that you need to churn out and you need some maybe peace and quiet, at that at the time there was no remote work. So maybe
Hmm.
today
True.
it is way better, right? At
True.
that time there was no remote work. So the space where you could get your peace and quiet is in the office. So you bring your life to the office to continue working. And that's why it was that way at the time. Right. So so it wasn't easy just knowing that, you you are raising a family.
Hmm.
With one child it was fine. With two children,
Hmm.
it now started to be, look like a struggle for me personally. It wasn't seen outside, but I knew that, I couldn't go on for much longer because it was
Hmm.
it was it was now tougher, wasn't as easy for me. And that really is some of the biggest challenges. Even with the most supportive bosses or the most supportive employers in the world, it can still come off as tough. I was fortunate to work with one of the most interesting places to work in, but it still doesn't take away the fact that building a family in a fast-paced environment will have challenges. There are some days you just want to literally scream the roof down just to let steam out, to other days when you get back home at 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
Hmm.
with a little baby and
Hmm.
basically a nursing baby breastfeeding, and you take a shower quickly and continue working
Oh
because
my
you have colleagues
goodness.
that you have in the office.
Oh my
Very
goodness.
crazy. Yes.
Crazy.
Very, very intense. Again, the company did not ask for it, but where you have things to do, you do what you have to do. It's just
Hmm.
it's just the nature of the work and the industry. But one thing though, even though this is the reality of that sector or that industry, the truth is, you know, because you spend most of your time with your colleagues, you get to meet some of the most amazing people. You get to connect with true people. Some of my best buddies today, um, not some, a chunk of my best buddies, not a lot, but a chunk of them were from my investment banking days.
Oh.
Till tomorrow, we are still best friends. So it gives you a lot. It gives you family, but
Hmm.
just the ability to put together your life as a
Hmm.
working mom, it can be tough. It can be really tough.
Hmm.
What I do, or what I used to do then, was I used to find those little things that would just make it. So I used to set, and I still do that today. So for me today, every month, I must have my spa dates by myself, right? So you have to introduce little things that will help you ease off
I
steam.
was gonna ask that what kept you going? That was gonna be my next
Exactly.
question
Yeah, that's what kept
because
me
it's so
going.
easy to throw in the
Yeah,
towel at that point
yeah.
and just give
And I
up.
must, yeah, and I must add, my husband was supportive. I mean, supportive in the
Very
sense
key.
that, yeah, supportive in the sense that any way he could help me take off, the stress from building a family, he
Hmm.
did that and has done that very well for me.
Wow.
So I would say, he has been very helpful
Hmm.
in that regard. Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't
So
know if I answered the question.
yeah,
Can I
yeah,
just get
yeah. Oh, more than I
okay?
think I just want to also like know, like speak more on like the things that kept you going because I feel like a lot of people can empathize with the challenges of being a mom, being a woman, being a wife. I know so many people in this bracket. So being and managing that with career, like at the same time, especially like a very demanding career like yours. What are some of the things that kept you going and still being able to like build more? Because I feel like some people just, like I said, they just give up, and life is tough. Life is tough. Life could be tough on people. Some people can't even have like health issues, so many things. So, like, what are some of the things that kept you going? I know you've mentioned that you take, personal care very importantly, and that's something, but are there any additional things that you did, whether in terms of like, any other thing at all that you've done or that you'd still do to kind of keep you pushing and motivated to go on?
Yeah, the first was, so the personal care was very important. Um, the financial reward was also something I used to look up to or look forward
Mm,
to, right? So it's important, right? I
yeah.
used to look forward to the financial reward. And then maybe thirdly, there was just a high I used to get from acing it. I used to get from, and I still get. So I
Yeah.
look forward to knowing that you did it, or this is what you had to do
Yeah.
to get this done.
I
I'm
think I
not,
know that. I know that.
yeah,
I know that from
exactly. I think
working with
I,
you. You're an
and the truth
achiever.
is,
You want to
yeah,
get that approved? Yes.
exactly. But the truth
Yeah.
is, not everybody, is motivated by the high. That's the
Mm,
truth, right? And it's okay to even know yourself early on.
mm,
Yeah, so important.
true.
If that is
True.
not a
Mm,
motivation for you, don't
mm,
stretch it. Though, and I feel like that has formed a big part of who I am today.
mm.
I must be on something exciting, right? Again, it might be a bad habit too. It's possible.
Definitely not to me. Maybe some other people will say otherwise, but not to me.
It
Because
might be a bad habit,
I'm the
but
same.
yeah, it keeps
I'm the
me
same.
going. Knowing
Always,
that you
there's
have a
always
tough
something. There must
challenge.
be a
Yeah,
challenge. There must be a new goal
exactly.
for every season.
Exactly. And it keeps
Yeah.
me going. It just fuels
Yeah.
me. It gives me a
Yeah.
high,
Mm.
adrenaline rush, and just keeps me
Yeah.
going. But not
Yeah.
everyone gets that high. So you
There
need to
you go.
look, you need to know yourself so that you don't, you don't
By the
have
time your colleagues are watching this show, this session, they will know they will know what you're speaking about. They will catch their subs. They'll catch their subs. My own colleagues too. My colleagues, by the time they're watching this show, they will know by my subliminal
having.
agreement, alignment with your. They will understand that, yeah. And that's interesting. I feel like the first step for any person is really self-discovery above all things. I say this a lot. I say this to everyone or most people that I come in contact with. Like, just know yourself. Like, just know yourself. Know what keeps you going. Know what motivates you. Don't go looking for success where you won't find success. Like, if you don't have patience and grit, you can't succeed as an entrepreneur. That's totally relatable. Totally relatable. Another thing I will also ask, I think, is about the name of the podcast is the Hungry Creative Podcast, and it speaks to like that hunger to just do more. So like you've spoken about like your experience in investment banking. You've spoken about founding. I don't think you've spoken about founding Grovane, and you also founded a number of businesses, a number of startups, and you've also helped to launch businesses. And also, is there a place of working on multiple things at the same time, or what inspired you to do those number of things, or just going into new ventures, new products, just inventing or just innovating things? What's really happening there?
Okay, so the first thing I will say is we are not all built the same.
Mm,
There are people who, the minute they work, and I have them in our company, the
yeah.
minute they work on multiple things, you've lost them,
Ah.
right? And then there are some other people, if they are not working on multiple projects, they are lost.
Hmm.
So I belong to the second group.
So that's second one.
However,
Hmm.
however, my hack or secret is I only focus on one thing per time.
Per time.
Yes. I don't focus on more than one per time.
Hmm.
So Grovane, for example, Grovane Advisory, thankfully, is grown, we're growing, is no longer at the teaching phase. So I would say I focus on one thing per time when it needs my attention. So I'm great at, ideating, incubating. And then when I see that it has now become stable and achieving steady growth stage. So while I'm ideating and incubating, I am putting in the structures based on fit for purpose, right? I have people within the company who are good at running with the process. So
Key.
you see what I was saying? I focus on one thing per time. One thing per time for me can be the process of just launching. In some other situations, is the process of finding product market fit. Today, I know the service I am focusing on to find product market fit. And that is the people who work with me closely know that that's the only thing that has my attention. Nothing else. Yes. So you can see interesting things outside. I'm either mostly at the back scene because I've handed it over, but you just don't know. So the biggest hack for me is I'm good at handling multiple things at the same time. And there are just people who are built that way, right? However, if you ask these different people, you will find out that they don't work on everything at the same time. They focus on one, and it also has to be strategic. So if you look at everything I am working on today, when I understood that, this is the target market I'm solving for, I am solving for SMBs. So every solution, every service, every product is really designed to address their pain point, one product, one solution, one service at a time, right? But they are not all launched at the same time.
Makes sense.
I cannot focus on everything at the same time. I only pick
Absolutely.
one, narrow my thoughts, roll my sleeves around just trying to. There's one that, I've been on 3 months now, finding product market fit, iterating every single day. We've not found it yet, in my opinion. But you will see it out there. We've not just found it. I know we've not found it yet. Because when you find it, it's almost like a lock-in, a round peg in a round hole. You don't have to force customers.
Yeah.
Naturally, they will look for you. So when you've not achieved that state, know that you've not found it yet.
True.
So we are currently at that phase and we are trying to iterate, listen to customers aggressively. That's where I am now. But outside, you wouldn't know. And that is what I do. So if I were to summarize, we are not all built the same. There are people who are great at focusing on one thing per time. It's important to have those people in your firm because those are the people who can run with the process and maybe improve it along the way, but not great at maybe ideating or just the chaotic part. Yes, strategy, chaos around. There's a lot of chaos around building, right? And then there are some other people who are great at handling the chaos around building and the chaos really just shows that there are many building blocks and many moving parts. And those people are great at handling them all at the same time, while focusing on just one. That's possible. You can have like 6 things, but your focus is on one. Exactly.
Absolutely. Per time. Yeah.
Per time.
Makes sense. Makes sense. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's an interesting question because my older son asked me the same thing. That
Really?
what would I? Yes, he asked me the same thing. That what would you tell your younger self? He needed to do a presentation and he aced it, by the way. It literally was on me. Yes.
Amazing.
And I will say the same thing. So even if it's not a direct response, I will tell you the same thing I told him.
Okay.
Optimism turned out to be my superpower. Yeah.
Can you shed more light on that?
You're asking the same question he asked afterwards. So I am very optimistic. Right. And as you know, when you're building a business, you can want to launch something today and you launch it and it falls flat on its face, right? Or the market doesn't accept it or doesn't receive it as positively as you would have expected.
Absolutely.
Stay optimistic anyways. I'm not saying hang on to that thing. What I've found is I only see the glass half full, not half empty. And it's turned out to be my superpower. In the sense that it's the ability to just have staying power on stuff, have staying power, but not be emotional. I've shut down a lot of businesses just launching. Maybe the first 4-6 months, I see that, there will be product market fit down the line, but I don't have the capacity.
True.
There are certain businesses I cannot do today, and I can tell you because I've tested them. I would not run a food company because
run a food company.
I will not run a food company.
You mentioned. I remember you saying that.
Yes, because it's very laborious, and I don't have the bandwidth for it. Right. However, I can invest in a food company, but you will not find me as the operator in a food business. And they are just setting other businesses. I've identified my space and I know where I thrive very well. Give me 6 months, I will find product market fit. Give me, I found in as little as 1 month, 2 months. I just know how to refine it. But there are some industries I will never touch. Lending is another one. There are people who will do great at it, but it's not just my space. I've looked at the models, I've looked at the building blocks, and I just see that, this is, if I am the core operator where I have to be, and this is contradictory because I've worked in a lending company before. Right? It's weird. But if I am to, I would not start a lending company from scratch. I can contribute my expertise, but where you say, you run this lending company, I don't think that I will want to wear, again, you can say, there are certain things you've done. Even the food company, we got into 15 offices. We're already growing. But when I looked at the model and the building blocks, remember what I said, the reason why I step back or why I say I'm not interested is because it's very laborious and I don't think I have the capacity. It doesn't mean I cannot. I've advised a lot of food businesses. I can do that because it's strategy. So on the strategic part, I would thrive. But where I have to be the operator, being very core in operations, I personally think I would struggle. So if I were to advise my younger self, I would say maybe optimism turned out to be my superpower, and I do very well. I don't know if this is an advice to my younger self. Maybe, yeah. So I'll stick with the first one, which is, optimism turned out to be my superpower. It's turned out to be what helps you have staying power. Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. That's such an interesting one.
Yeah.
And I think I can relate to that a lot as well. Because sometimes I fear myself that I'm so optimistic about things. Like, I'm generally just like, let's go again.
Exactly.
That's fine. Let's go again. Yeah. I've gotten burnt, but
absolutely,
let's try it again. We'll re-strategize, try again.
Is the superpower, if you ask me, is the superpower of an entrepreneur. If you want to, because if you look at how many times you have failed or gotten burnt, trust me, you would retire. You wouldn't do anything anymore. But when you stay optimistic, it's a superpower for me because it fuels my need to keep going.
I think everyone needs something. Everyone needs one motivation that keeps you going. You just need to find it, whatever it is. So for some people, it's something else, but it's very important to know what keeps you going. I think, as you've shared, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk a bit about personal financing as an entrepreneur, as an individual. Do you have some tips that you can share for individuals this time, not just businesses?
I don't know if I'm in the best position to give any tip on personal finances because I will even say I'm finding my rhythm personally. So if maybe I'm speaking to people who are like me, trying to find your rhythm around your personal finance, what you want to do is two things. And this is what I'm learning right now. The first is I don't put my money anywhere that I do not understand, that you cannot explain to me as a baby. Right. Yes.
I know what that means.
Yes. So
I
there are
think I
certain
know what that means.
investments. Yeah. So when you hear things like
Crypto.
Cryptocurrency, FX trading, MLM, I don't touch it. Multi-level marketing, those people.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, there are different types.
Okay.
If you cannot explain it to me in simple terms, where how you make your money, your money is invested in XYZ, and I can see what is invested in, and this is how you generate your return.
Yeah.
And then from the return we are generating, we pay this portion back to our financiers and we retain this as a business. I don't touch it because I don't understand it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's number one rule for me. And so while I said I'm still figuring out my personal finances, I have never gotten burnt with personal finance because I don't touch what I don't get, what I don't understand. That's number one. Number two, I preserve my capital. So if I have a simple ratio, and this ratio, to be honest, is actually not from personal finances because really, I think personally, my personal finance is not where I want it to be yet. Corporate finance, I can say, oh yes, I've done pretty good. So I can speak about corporate finance and talk about how I'm trying to apply those things to personal finance today. So the second is we do not. So I have a split. We invest in, simple instruments, right? FDs, money market instruments, very simple ones. Not a lot in savings. Maybe savings now is almost non-existent. There are certain financial institutions I trust, commercial banks to, very solid and strong MFBs. I personally have a big portion of investment. So let me not say big portion so that I'm not misrepresenting. So what I mean is, if I'm doing an investment, so if it's 100%, I would say my savings will not be more than 2%, right, in savings account, right, 2-3%, or max 5 that we just put there just to take position. A big chunk, personally, I would say 70% goes into other money market instruments, right? FDs, placements, bank placements that would give me, and I de-risk. So you would never find me putting everything in one bank.
What is FD?
Fixed deposits, where you place money. So think about
use a lot of these acronyms.
Oh, like what I'm
you have to spell it out for us. We are the average, the layman. Yeah.
So I would say 5% savings.
Yeah.
70% is in bank placement. Bank placements can be as simple as placements with PiggyVest. That's a placement. Or with her economy. I'm saying her economy because if I went to covenant with me, she's someone I know and speak to. So I would like to talk about her platform as well. Her economy is a platform you can put money in, right? Commercial banks, MFBs, those are options. And then the remaining 30%, I invest in the real sector. The real sector to some people can be equities, right? So 20, I would say 20 to, for me, it's like not 30%, actually like 20, right? So I play between 5% savings, 70 to 75 in where my principal and even interest is guaranteed. And then the other 20 to 25% is what I play with in the real sector. Also, interests that I earn from my placements, I can also play with that and add it to my 20-25%.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Makes
so
sense.
Real sector can be, Fiyin talks about a food company that he's looking for investors. If I have capital, that's where I would take it from to invest. I want to invest in Dangote shares. I want to invest in, public stocks. That's where I take that from, right? If I want to invest in private stocks, private shares, where I'm incubating it proprietarily, or there's a third party friend that I think I like the idea and I want to put money, that's where I would take it from. And then when I talked about placements also can include treasury bills, can include bonds, because anything that secures my principal and interest is where I put 70 to 75% of my money. Again, remember I mentioned I'm not fully taking my advice today because I'm trying to generate personal income. But this is what we apply in the corporate, and it's working for us very well, and is what I'm trying to apply to me personally. Yeah.
Amazing. That was very, very, very straightforward, and I think it's clear. Some random questions coming your way.
Okay.
Yeah, some random questions. If you weren't in finance, what career path will you be in?
It's so funny how I don't even know. Maybe if I wasn't in finance, what career path? Today, I would tell you sales.
Okay. Makes sense.
Years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, I would never have mentioned sales. Yeah. But I would say
Okay.
sales. Do I need to say why?
Why? Yeah, sure.
I would say sales because I think over the years I've become really comfortable with. In fact, I would say I do more sales today than
Mm.
finance. I have my people doing finance more.
When you're a
Um,
founder, you tend to do a lot of sales. I do
exactly.
sales.
Exactly. And I would say sales now because my understanding of sales is so different. I don't beg.
Same.
I don't. Yeah, I don't beg for. I honestly
Yeah.
don't beg for clients.
Mm.
Sales is really selling my value to you. Like
Absolutely.
I'm helping you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you
Yeah.
look at sales from problem solving, except you are not truly solving a problem,
There you
when
go.
you're solving a problem,
Yeah.
selling is like eating and taking your breakfast,
I'm
taking your
telling
lunch.
you, it's just the order. It's just
Yeah,
the
it's
order
so,
of
so
life. It's
simple, so
just
straightforward.
talking to a friend, just pitching
Yeah, I'm
yourself,
solving your problem.
basically.
Exactly. You're not
Solving a
helping me.
problem.
So I'm solving your problem, and in exchange,
Mm.
we're exchanging value.
Getting
That's
value.
it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would
Makes
say
sense.
sales.
Makes sense. I agree. I'm sure
Yeah.
your colleagues won't disagree either, and your clients. uh, okay. Describe your leadership style in a few words.
Very human.
Mm.
Yeah. Very
And
human.
how's that played out?
Interestingly, very good. Very, very human, but like never would say, never want to say. Very
With a little
human.
bit of fire.
Absolutely. Very human. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, there was a colleague of mine. Remember, I told you about my investment banking story. So, there's still a bit
Yeah.
of PTS. There were some submissions we needed to do yesterday. My colleague literally worked till like 12 a.m. And I said, you know what? Today, take the day off. I've approved it, tell HR. For me, that's human, right?
Wow.
Or when February was a very, very intense month for us as a company, for corporate finance specifically. And on the 28th of the month, I said, you know what? I personally approved a spa allowance for everybody in corporate finance.
Whoop, whoop.
And we took the day off. Is that not human enough? Right. But you see, before that human comes out, you must
Disclaimer.
show me.
Disclaimer.
So that you don't think that
The
we jolly
ultimate
up every
disclaimer.
day. Before, so I'm very human, right?
Yeah.
But you can never take advantage of it
There you
for
go.
me. Yeah,
There you
you
go.
can never take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Before you get to see that side, because human beings are human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
I ensure that you understand that you are a human being and should be treated as a human being, first of all, right? I'm not saying I treat anybody else differently. I'm just
Go on. Don't worry.
I think what I'm trying to say is my first line is to be human, right? Over the years, I think that humanity, I've now put a lead on it a little bit. So you will not find that my, pretty pleasant nature, vulnerability firsthand. No, there is now a lead. Before it was, face value as you come, as you go. Now, while my leadership style is still very human, you can't take advantage of it because there's almost just no room for you to. It doesn't exist, even for me to. Now, I've learned to introduce a new layer. So, even the up close and personal, I'll be human with you the way I'm human to a complete stranger. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's by nature, and that unfortunately cannot change. Yes. And I don't intend to become somebody else, because one thing I've been so conscious of is I don't want to look at myself in the mirror 15 years, 20 years in building companies, global companies, and I see a beast in the mirror. Never. I want to still look like myself, and nobody has the authority or right to change me. So what I do today is I've created a lead. A lead can be people. I've created systems and structures before certain people get to me, right? Because not everyone can unfortunately handle it. So those are things I'm working on now. You create systems and structures because you don't want to be somebody else. I still want to be me. I still want to listen to my colleague tell me about how she's not feeling fine and not think that she's lying. No, I want to hear and say, oh, you don't sound good. I think you should take the day off. And that's because I can see that during the month it's been intense for everybody. And
Absolutely.
I don't want to stop being that person. I want to
Absolutely.
listen to you talk about, how I want to see that you are getting married and say, you know what, this is a ticket for you and your husband, you know, for as a wedding gift, in addition to whatever, right? And I don't want to stop being that person. I want to genuinely see somebody in need and say, how can we help this person? I'm not changed from being that person. However, over the years, I've realized that we are all human beings, and human beings will always human. They'll always be
You
human
get.
beings.
You
And we want
get.
to take advantage of certain things. What I've done,
Absolutely.
what I'm doing today is I am adding layers.
Mm.
Eventually, what will happen is before certain people get to me, you've passed through 10 layers before you get to me, right? It's just what it is. Layers
Yeah.
in terms of structures, layers in terms of people.
Yeah.
So you don't just have direct access to me anymore. You go
Mm.
to this, you go through, and that is literally how it evolves. So
Mm.
only those who are every leader should have their core circle, even in
Absolutely.
business. So only
Mm-hmm.
those within that know, and ensuring that my DNA is passed very, very strongly. So I don't want someone in my core circle who is a beast, or who will now create walls, almost like change the culture without me knowing. So as
Exactly.
I'm growing, I'm so particular about the people who lead with me.
Exactly.
Right? I can lead from the top. I have people on the next level, right?
Mm.
Or people on the same level as me and cascades down to the next, because these are the people who would build the culture with the younger ones,
Trickle
the
it
other
down.
people who trickle it
Absolutely.
down. I don't want the DNA diluted. I want to look at a new hire who has spent 3 months and recognize our culture once I see them or
Mm.
work with them
Mm.
for 5 minutes. So that is like my leadership style. Now I'm very intentional about delegating. I'm very intentional about creating those layers, building it very deliberately, very, carefully. I'm also very deliberate about remaining human. I never want to lose that part of me. Yeah.
Very, 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 very interesting, very
Yeah.
relatable answer again.
Yeah.
I think I have one opinion or one theory about founders and
Mhm.
people generally, especially like business leaders and founders, especially. I feel like I don't think any human being is inherently bad. I think people go through phases of, life lessons, and some people call it whip. Like I know having like personally, getting burnt. You mentioned about people, you give people an inch to take a mile. I've had so many stories and experiences. But one thing that you said I'm going to take away with me is never changing, right? Never changing because someone, came and, made a mess, or someone came and tried to change things.
Yeah.
Never changing, because at the
Yeah.
core of any human being is who you are,
That
right?
is
Who
what
you
makes you who you
fundamentally are.
are. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
remaining true to that person is very key. Like,
Very key.
the childish person in you,
Exactly.
the fun person in you, the
Yeah.
loving and empathetic person in you,
Yeah.
never losing that. I think that's
Yeah.
something I'm definitely going to take away, and
Absolutely.
just keep on doing that. Keep on doing who you are, regardless of wherever comes along the way.
It's almost like you having a toxic, I want to say friend, but if you have a toxic friend, then I don't see any reason why you should be friends anymore.
Some
So I
people
would
have
almost say
toxic
toxic.
friends.
So if you have a toxic friend, like
Mm.
you need to evaluate that friendship.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say toxic family member, because unfortunately you can't do anything about your family members, right?
Family's
You love
family.
them
Yeah.
anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
what you need to do, if you have a toxic family member, you create layers, right?
Mm.
And for me, that's the most efficient. I
Mm.
still we have like stand-ups every morning, firm-wide stand-ups every Monday. And, maybe someone gives an update and I can say, that is the big praise, not the little one, right?
Mm.
You hear me, I'm great at gassing my people up,
Mm.
right? Even at some point I was asked 2 months ago, I was like, even this guy, are you sure? I now see why some leaders don't give flowers. It almost looks like you are working with the witch from the West. Because over time. But I feel like the simplest thing is to throw in the towel and become a beast, if you ask me.
Mm.
The most difficult is to find a way to retain your humanity. It's almost like you saying, I became beating your children left, right, and center.
Yeah.
Flogging them is the simplest thing, if you ask me. It's so easy
Mm-hmm.
to raise a kid. The most
Yeah.
difficult is engaging,
Engaging.
having civil conversations with them,
Yeah.
and now achieving results with that.
Yeah.
That is the most
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with your employees. You don't want to treat them like they're slaves. No, they are human. Don't lose their humanity, but find a way. Help them. Help them. Where you don't need to contribute. Nowadays, if I don't need to speak, before I could be very playful even with the team. Now, if I don't need to, I just introduce that once in a while, and then I still gas them up because for me, I don't know. I'm not using your flowers to do anything. I must
Exactly.
give them back to you.
Give it to them.
Right. I'll give it to you because I know
Yeah.
I know what it does to the psyche and how it even spurs you to achieve the next and the next thing. But
Absolutely.
you know, what I've also found is when you find your own people too, it's not so difficult. It just
They
sticks and
get
it
it.
just sticks. Yeah.
They get it.
Yeah,
They
they get
get
it.
it. They
Yeah.
get it. Wow, amazing gems there, EJ. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
You're welcome.
So we're wrapping up, and I would always ask this question. All our guests will get asked this question. So it's that: what are you doing to be a better version of yourself?
I will just talk. So I don't even want to go over professional. I think I've found I listen. I'm listening more.
Mm,
I feel like when you listen more, you unlock new levels to you that you it's almost like you create mystery, which is good for you always want to be in a position where whoever is on the other side of the divide, never not just even in negotiation, anything, you want to leave room to truly understand what is going on in the other person's mind. Right? So and when you know that to answer the question very simply, I am learning active listening. When you actively listen to the other party, it puts you at an advantage. You become calmer, you become more strategic with decision making, you become more intentional. You're just in a better position, right?
Yeah.
That's one. Secondly, my reading style is pretty interesting. Yes, I have books, but there are some books that I've not even got into. I have books that that it's just nice. The first rush of getting a book, I have it. But I find that the easiest way for me to read is I learn a lot from experiences, right? So reading for me can even be as simple. I still read books, of course, but reading for me can also be as simple as reading articles, Medium articles, reading articles on LinkedIn, listening to, capturing a 5-minute article today, reading, something from someone you respect and just taking that knowledge with you, right? I would say I have broken away from how I used to view reading before, where it just had to be a rigid process of reading a book. And you find that you are almost postponing and, saying, oh, I've not had the time, or I only get to read when I'm on flights, right? A simple 5 minutes read on something that you need a solution to, or you stumble and you know that you don't need it yet, but this 5 minutes read will help you unlearn stuff or relearn stuff.
Yeah.
I do it. So I've broken reading into bite-sized. I see an article, I read it. I don't postpone it. I read it on the spot. When I then have the time to read a full book, I would do that. But every day, deliberately just reading something that would improve my skills, that would help me be better. I do that. I don't know if those two. So the first is active listening to people around me, younger, older, peers, actively listening to them.
Amazing. Thanks so much, EJ. And we've come to the end.
Hi, my name is Ejemen, and you are listening to the Hungry Creative Podcast.